Hey, this is Seagrove, and today I'm here with Gabe Smart and Connor Finton. We're going to be talking about the Sacramento meta. So if you guys would just take a moment and introduce yourselves. Gabe, you've been on here already this season. Why don't you go ahead and start us off?
Hi, yeah, I'm Gabriel Smart. I go by Smart TCG on most of my socials. I'm sponsored by Dead Draw Gaming, and I will be attending Sacramento along with most other events coming up in the foreseeable future. Sacramento is my hometown. Regional, I live about 30-ish minutes away from the convention center, so I'm really excited to compete finally. I'm an event I don't have to fly to, so yeah.
Mhm.
And
And
my name's
Connor.
Con.
Oh,
Oh,
sorry.
sorry. Yeah, my name's Connor Finton. I'm a longtime TCG player. Last year's Arlington Regional Champion. Haven't been anything yet this season. Not going to Sacramento either, but I'll be at Toronto and a bunch of other stuff throughout the rest of the season. If you guys want to follow me on my socials, it's Condor TCG for everything. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Yep, and we'll have you can see their socials right on the screen as well. And Connor, I think you were one of the first people ever on my channel, like first 10 or something, which is pretty cool. But
we definitely did quite a few back like 2017,
yeah, right when it was
like
getting
that
started.
era.
Super cool to have you back. Okay, so obviously Sacramento the week after Peoria, same meta, and we had a Lost Box mirror in the finals. I wanted to hear your thoughts on that finals match, how it went, how it should have gone, and what you think of those two versions of Lost Box. Connor, why don't you start?
Yeah, so I actually didn't watch the finals
Okay.
of
Did you see
Peoria.
the list?
I have looked at the lists.
Okay.
I'm a huge fan of Kyogre. I have been for a long time. I think that when like played perfectly, Kyogre is the best variant of Lost Box. Has the most comeback potential. Can swing games really far. I know as someone who's played a lot of Lugia, I get real scared when I see the Kyogre come down, or like you see an energy recycler and you start to shake a little bit. But I think both lists are super good. I think the deck it is definitely the most skill rewarding deck in the format. It lets you the players who have played it have put a lot of time into it and have had a lot of success. So
Mm-hmm. Connor, when I hear people say Kyogre until this weekend, I thought they were playing Dragonite, Raikou, and Kyogre. Is when
Mhm.
people say Kyogre, do they mean either this like one prize variant or the other one, or are they specifically talking about this one prize variant?
I think that people are referring to both. The one prize variant I think is scarier for the most part. It lets the comeback potential of Kyogre really shine. You have more turns, more time to really dig through. There's no without your opponent taking that two prize turn. It can be a little bit like less consistent to get off those big turns, especially early game. But I think the deck still holds a lot of strength without the two prizers and those swing turns and stuff.
For sure. Gabe, what do you think about that finals matchup?
Yeah, so I watched a little bit of it. All I heard, because I watched a few minutes of it, was there was a time issue at the very end where Jack didn't have enough time to finish the game or something like that, and then obviously Raymond won 1-0. But I feel like that's kind of a part of the format right now and how decks are being played in a lot of ways. Especially we've seen that with Gardevoir quite a bit. I saw someone had like 7 ties throughout the 15 rounds with Gardevoir, so it goes to show that a lot of things are going to time. But when it comes to Lost Zone itself, I think that the Zamazenta version is really cool. I've always been a big fan of it. It originally popped up, I believe, in Portland. Hunter Butler got top 16 at Portland with Zamazenta Kyogre, and then it kind of fell off in popularity because more people were favoring the turbo variant, and now we see Zamazenta back. I like the Kyogre Zam build. I think it's a lot more stable in a lot of ways than the turbo version. Sometimes the turbo one feels a little bit chaotic at times,
Yeah.
and I just kind of like that the Kyogre version, you just kind of have more turns because you're not relying on Force Seal Stones all the time and stuff like that. You're not trying to turn one Dragonites, so you have a much more, I guess, stable game plan of what you're actually trying to accomplish. Zamazenta is a very, very good card right now in general. Hits really good numbers against a lot of things in formats. Specifically versus Charizard, you're able to Cramorant for 110 and then Zamazenta for 220, which is perfect math against one of the most popular decks. And also you do take a really solid matchup against popular decks like Miraidon as well. So if you want to ask like which one I prefer, I think the Zamazenta one is my preferred one, just because I actually think Turbo is kind of it's like very close to being inconsistent. Like I've like ran into a lot of issues with like Turbo where if you just like Pokestop into the wrong things, or it's just like that opening hand just sometimes is like awful. Whereas I think the Zamazenta version, since it is a little bit slower, it has more space for like more consistency cards and stuff like that. So I personally prefer the Zamazenta one, but they're both very strong in their own right.
No.
Yeah, kind of to add to the end of what Gabe said there, it's the Zamazenta one. You just have it recovers a lot better from a slow start, or if you with the turbo version, sometimes if you don't really, if your turn 1, turn 2 aren't perfect, the game's kind of over. Where a lot of times the Kyogre Zam build can come back from a not perfect start, can capitalize and make games out of, like I said, make games out of bad starts.
So we saw 2 Lost Box in the finals, and then we had the Sablezard lower down. 2 questions from that. Is Sablezard legit contender now, something to watch out for? And is Lost Zone again to be seen as king of the meta?
So personally, I'm not a big fan of Sablezard. I think it's just worse than other Lost Box variants. Sorry, what was the second part of that question?
And is Lost Zone sort of the king of the meta again? It felt like it used to be, and then it wasn't for a while, and now after this, is it back on top? It won 2 in a row, right? Or
I think Lost Box. So yeah, I think the deck is going to continue to be at the top of the results, but maybe not. I think it's going to stay in a similar usage pool. Like, I don't think a lot more people are going to be picking up Lost Box because it won this weekend, but I think the people that are playing Lost Box are going to continue playing Lost Box because it's obviously shown that it's very strong. You can win them the events, and the people who are playing Lost Box have been playing it for a long time for the most part, and like they've kind of been sticking with it as they go, and I think those people will continue to have success.
Yeah, so to answer the first part of the question, I think Radiant Charizard is solid. I think the deck is significantly harder to play than the Turbo variant, so I think that if you're just trying to pick up a Lost Zone variant for Sacramento, I would recommend not touching that deck. I personally don't like not having Radiant Greninja. I think that is an amazing card, just being able to draw out of sticky situations. I actually don't think the Radiant Charizard variant beats Charizard EX all the time, just because it's much more prone to their lost cities. You struggle to one-shot also certain things like Pidgeot as well, whereas the Turbo variant, you can, like Raikou the Pidgeot and stuff like that. So I think that some matchups that are really popular right now aren't as good. And then to answer your question on whether or not Lost Box is the king of the format, I think Lost Box will probably take up the highest meta share heading into Sacramento. I know it wasn't the highest at Peoria. It was actually, I believe, Charizard, but I think that might change. But I don't think as many people are going to hop on Zamazenta. I think players heading into this event are just going to hop on Turbo instead, because I think Zamazenta is a little bit different of a style of deck that I think you have to. It just plays like a different Lost Zone variant in a lot of ways, and I think that players are scared to make the transition over from Turbo Lost Box to Kyogre Zam, just because it plays slower. Like the matchups are different, and just kind of how you manage your resources. And I also think that players that are considering like playing Lost Box and haven't put a whole lot of time into it are just going to run with probably the Turbo variant, because I think that you can get away with misplaying more with the Turbo variant, just because of how fast it is. You can turn 1 people as well. People like that kind of aspect about it. So yeah, I would say Lost Box is probably going to be the most popular deck, and overall would be probably the most successful. But I don't know if it's the best deck though. I think it's one of the best decks for sure.
We also had 2 Miraidon lists in top 8, and I think they were by testing partners, which interestingly enough they didn't have the same list. Most notable, there are a few minor differences throughout. They seem to have similar overall structure, but a few discrepancies. The biggest one being one played a Mew and one didn't. I don't think I'm not going to ask, should the Mew be played or should it not be played, but why might one play Mew or not play Mew in Miraidon?
So I guess I'll start on this one. So the reason as to why I think Mew is largely in the deck is that for anyone that's played Miraidon, sometimes the deck just randomly stalls out like mid game. Like you'll get like a great start, and then like you'll use a judge, and you just draw into absolutely nothing, or like no draw supporter, because your deck doesn't have like a fusion strike engine or flower selecting. It's not necessarily the most consistent deck. So I think that is the arguments behind playing the Mew. It helps out, when your opponent Roxanne you or uses something like the Iono. I personally am actually not a huge fan of it right now currently in the deck. I would rather it just be the Lumineon. I think that players were expecting Giratina to perform much better than it did at Peoria, and Giratina really struggled. I think largely due to Lost Box's success. So I personally think that Mew EX is an okay card, but I personally would just change it for the Lumineon. And then between the two variants, there was the Beach Court one, and then the Path, and also Beach Court one. I personally prefer kind of like the hybrid version. However, that version doesn't play Escape Rope, which is a little bit weird because you can get your Flaffies locked in the active because there's no actual way to retreat them except by using the Dynamotors preemptively to attach energies on them to prevent the boss stall. So that was something that I saw that was kind of interesting, that I would like to add in at least 1 or 2 switch cards into that hybrid version. But I do prefer the hybrid one.
Connor, anything to add to that?
I think so. I think Gabe got all the...
Yeah, it's kind of a weird niche question anyways. Next thing I want to talk about was Mew. We saw 3 Mews pretty high up. All DTE, 2 with Grabber. What are your thoughts on Mew going forward in the meta, in this meta? Connor, why don't you start?
Yeah, so I had some issues with my flight and wasn't able to make it to Peoria, but if I had made it, I was going to play DTE Mew. I think the deck is better positioned than people are giving it credit for. It can still, Charizard's rough, but it can still, it can still win games with Path. I think Path at the Peak is just like such an insanely strong card, and I think Mew is the deck that uses it to its fullest right now in our current meta.
Yeah.
And so I think that the deck, I think we'll actually see a little bit of an increase in play going into next weekend. I think that people saw that it can still, compete, and so I think people are definitely going to want to keep playing their Mews, especially people who have played it in the past.
Yeah, I think that Mew's a deck that all the Mew players, which there seems to be like a cult of them, I am included, we all want a reason to play the deck. There are a lot of players who are like, I love to play Mew. Me personally, I love to play Mew, and if it's a deck that I think that is like well positioned, there's a very high chance that I'm going to bring it. So I do actually think, I was actually talking about this, I don't know if I said it on this podcast or something else, but I thought that DT Mew had potential in this format.
Yep.
Because Fusion Strike just cannot really beat Charizard if they set up. However, the DTE Mew version can, especially with the card called Luxray that saw success in Rowan Stavenow's list. You pretty much just try and blow up their hand in one turn. You can use Judge and then use a Grabber to pull out like any of their Pokemon that they might have, and then use the Luxray to strip, something like Arven, and then you pretty much just try and run them over with Technoblast after Technoblast with the Mew VMAX. So I prefer that version. I think it's going to see play. However, whenever Mew does well, we see Spiritomb. So I actually don't know if people are going to respect Mew this event, but if it does well again, then I think people are probably just going to tech it out of the format for Toronto. So I think this is probably the last tournament for a while where the DT Mew deck really has a lot of potential, because I think the turnaround between Peoria and Sacramento is just so quick that I'm not sure if a lot of players are going to change their list, because going into these tournaments, you always have to look at it and say the majority of the players going to these tournaments are casual players. The results from Peoria might change some people, but a lot of them are going to kind of stick to their 60 cards, like they might not make any changes. So I would not be surprised if people didn't respect Mew again at this tournament like they didn't for Peoria, and the deck saw a bunch of success again, specifically the DT version with the Luxray.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree with the cycle that Gabe's talking about there, where I think that this weekend it's probably fine, but if we see another good finish by Mew, it's probably not good for Toronto.
People will catch on and just be like, nope, Spiritomb or Drapion in every list.
Now, if it does bad this weekend, then maybe it's still fine for Toronto. But
how many Grabbers should you play in Mew?
That I don't know. I think
I haven't put enough time into Grabber personally to really be able to tell you.
So I tried a list with 4. That's what I was just trying to go like all in, and I had like some pretty cool plays where I could strip people's like entire hands. However, so much of the time that card is a dead card. So I think anywhere between 2 to 4 is fine. I personally would play it. I think it's really important versus some matchups like the Charizard matchup and stuff like that. I think that it's just important to strip cards. And also, you can always burn it at any point in time. And just being able to look at your opponent's hand, it's actually, I think, honestly, there to look at your opponent's hand more than anything before you use the Luxray. It kind of reminds me of the Zoroark control deck that I know like Caleb Gettimer when like Azul ran back at Denver Regionals 2019, where they had a Lavender Town in the deck just to see what the opponent had, and then like they could make their decision based off what your opponent had in the hand. And that's kind of the closest interaction that I can see. Obviously that was a stadium card, and this is an item card, but I thought that was kind of a cool interaction just to like see what they have is something that is actually pretty underrated in the Pokemon trading card game right now.
I think especially good in a deck like Mew that relies so much on like you can see their hand. Oh, they have a stadium. I'm not gonna just drop this path right now. Tons of stuff like that. Like a lot of situational stuff.
Yeah, or sometimes you have to like blind judge, and like if you know their hand is bad, then you just don't have to judge and stuff like that. So there's like a lot of situations where the card is actually more useful than just stripping a card out of their hand.
So Charizard was a big deck. It made a lot of day 2 appearances. 3, I think, top 16s, but no top 8s. How do you read those results?
I guess I'll start because I actually played Charizard to the tournament. I ended up bubbling out of top 32, got 38th. Drew Kennett played the 60 that we worked on and got top 16 with it. So shout out to them for doing so well with it. I think that Charizard not doing well, or not doing as well as it did at Brazil, actually probably sets it up better for this tournament because I think less people are going to respect the deck. So I think that Charizard probably didn't do as well because there was so much Chien-Pao at Peoria. That's like one of the big things that I noticed. There's a lot of Chien-Pao, a lot of Lost Box, and also the Miraidon Path variants came back, which can be a little bit scary for them. So I do think that Charizard is in a little bit of a better spot heading into Sacramento just because Mew now exists, and Mew is in a deck that Charizard can just, if you're having problems with versus the DT variant, just toss in a Spiritomb and the matchup becomes really good. So you have the ability to easily tech for some things, or maybe add more outs to Path of the Peak, kind of things that the deck might struggle with, especially because I think Chien-Pao is going to lose popularity because of all the Lost Zone decks that are seeing success. I think that is going to help Charizard because that is, considered one of Charizard's more difficult matchups. But I think it's still in a decent spot. I'm not surprised to see it. Not see a ton of success at Peoria Regionals just because it did so well at the Brazilian event. And I think a lot of people took notice of that and adjusted accordingly. However, now that, we are more putting our focus onto the Lost Zone decks and the Miraidon decks that saw so much success at Peoria, I think that now things might change a little bit more.
And Gabe, I wanted to ask you about Entei versus Pidgeot and your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so the reason I don't have, so I personally am pro Pidgeot V. The reason is using Entei versus the mirror match feels really bad just because it's an easy Pokemon that they can knock out during the middle portion of the game, because that matchup usually just becomes 2-shot after 2-shot after 2-shot, and then if you have the ability to do 1-shot at some point, you do have the advantage. So that is an easy Pokemon at some point that they can knock out. And just in testing, I really wasn't running into a whole lot of situations where I needed the Entei. It's like okay versus Lost Box, it's okay versus some other matchups, but I felt like just like basically, in my opinion, I like to play Charizard by just focusing on what makes Charizard so good, and that's a 330 HP Pokemon that's almost impossible to knock out in one hit. So that's what I really tried to focus on the list that I played. And I never ran into a situation where I needed the Entei, and just being able to Pidgeot off the board, because there's a lot of times where you just need to Seal Stone just to get off the ground. So just not having to bench down a 2-prize liability that you can always toss back in the deck just felt really, really good in general. So I think Entei is cool, but I don't really think that you need a 2-prize basic attacker in the deck, because I think Charizard just kind of fills that void that you need anyways.
No.
I know in my Peoria testing, I cut the Entei really fast, realized it wasn't I don't feel like it really does all that much for you. And I really like getting the 2-prize off the board, so I also really, really prefer the Pidgeot in the Charizard deck.
Nice. So there was a lot of Chien-Pao. Only one made top 8. Is Chien-Pao... It seems like Chien-Pao's getting more and more and more and more hype. Is it... I don't even know what to ask about. I just wanted to hear your thoughts on Chien-Pao.
It one-shots Charizard.
Yeah.
That's I think that's most of it.
It has the ability to win any matchup if it draws well, and I think that's what people gravitate towards. For example, Lugia V-Star, if it sets up really well versus Charizard, it's still an unfavorable matchup. You know, there's a lot of top decks in format where if you set up well versus unfavorable, you're still oftentimes going to lose. Chien-Pao is the ultimate glass cannon deck that it can beat literally any deck in format if you pop off. However, there is a problem with it in that it is very bricky and clunky. There are multiple top players at Peoria that completely tanked out of the event. I know John Eng played it, Isaiah Bradner played it, and multiple other strong players decided to go with it and did not see success with it. So I think that is the problem with the deck, is that when it sets up, it's arguably, I think, the most unstoppable deck in format when it gets, you know, like the double barrel, the Baxcaliburs. You're just like, wow, this deck can't lose. However, getting there is harder said than done. I actually did a little bit of testing with it earlier today, and I was just drawing horribly, so I put the deck away. But if you want to take a huge risk, then I think that that is the perfect deck. It almost kind of reminds me of the Greninja Break of the format, where like when that deck set up perfectly, it was really, really hard to beat. However, it just doesn't do it consistently,
right.
And that's kind of what Chien-Pao is right now.
Okay. Well, I know you all are both Lugia lovers. If you had to play Lugia in Sacramento, are you going? I think we saw 3 colorless in top 32 and 1 single strike. Which version would you take if you had to play for Sacramento? Connor, why don't you start?
So I'd probably go colorless right now. I just don't like single strike's answers to Charizard is the biggest thing. It was the most popular deck in Peoria. I know that it's probably it might go down a little bit, but I just feel like the Charizard matchup's so rough for single strike, even with things like the Cabalion and, you know, trying to tech for it. It just feels so bad that I'd probably just end up playing single strike. I mean, end up playing colorless just because I really don't like that matchup.
No.
I have a hot take. I'm going to say screw the Charizard matchup. I think single strike is much better versus the rest of the field. I think that colorless does not consistently beat all the Lost Zone variants if they pop off, whereas the single strike variant does. I think that Miraidon destroys colorless if it gets going, whereas single strike actually has a response with Staunch Jr. Almost every single matchup I think single strike does better against, except that one matchup, which is Charizard. So if I were going into Sacramento and I was considering a Lugia deck, I would say I would rather lose to Charizard, which is a more inconsistent deck, than losing to Miraidon, because I think that more casual players and also top players are going to play Miraidon as opposed to Charizard. I think that Miraidon actually might be the second or most played deck this tournament after it just saw so much success at Peoria. I think we've reached the point where people respect the deck and view it as a real deck. I know that was a big thing after Worlds, where people are like, is this deck actually real? And then I got second place and we're like, is this deck actually real? And then they did it again and got top 8 and top 4. So I think we've reached that point where people respect the deck so much. So I'd just say screw the Charizard matchup. I'm going to try and just dodge it. Kind of like how Lugia was trying to dodge the Duraludon matchup for a long time. Yeah. I would say the same thing with Charizard. I think single strike is better overall.
Speaking of, we saw some Arctura. How? Why did that work?
Two-shotting everything in format is not terrible. I don't know.
Arceus is consistent, like...
I mean, we saw Braden Elford start 7-1-1 with Arceus, Vulpix, Pidgeot with Sharon's Care. It just was a 2-shot deck. That's all it did. You know, it basically just relied on Vulpix to block certain decks and just Sharon's Cared. And, you know, they got top, I think, 128 or maybe 256. They made it to day 2, but yeah, they didn't have a good day 2, but compared to their day 1. But it was a cool deck. So I don't know about Arctura. I don't think it's that great, but it beats all the colorless Lugias if you hit them. So.
Yeah, and it has a good matchup, like a free matchup.
Yeah.
But we've seen Arc Pile do well in the past. Just Arc plus whatever. It just
there was a barrel too in the list, right? I was like, what is happening? Yeah. Oh.
Yeah, but I don't think that it's any sort of real meta threat or real.
I would not play because it can't beat Miraidon, and I don't think it can beat Charizard if it sets up, because Charizard will eventually one-shot you, and if it becomes a 2-shot war and they can start one-shotting you, it just does not work. So,
cool. Well, last question. What is the best deck that you will not be playing in Sacramento? Connor, why don't you start?
I obviously, like I said, I'm not actually going to be attending Sacramento, but if I were, I think the best deck that I wouldn't be playing,
Well, that's right.
probably just honestly, I wouldn't be playing Lost Box. I
Okay.
just as the Lost Box, that's my answer for everything. I've made it my mission to put 0 time into Lost Box and not have to even think about it.
Since you're
So
not
I
going,
test.
answer this. What is the deck that you would play if you were going?
Okay, if I were going, I think I'd probably be on Charizard. Um, the deck just feels it's really fun to play. I like having the big bulky dude. I think it has a chance versus pretty much everything in the format. 30 HP is a lot. Hits really hard. I
Cool.
don't know. All the generic stuff. Oh, I really want to play Pidgeot EX while it's good.
Yeah. Gabe, what would you play? Or what's the worst deck best deck, sorry, that you will not play?
Yeah, the best deck I probably would not play would be Gardevoir to this tournament. I do not want to tie myself out of the event. We saw the Azul group run into that issue this tournament where they had quite a few ties. I know other players as well were just running into tie situations. I think that also the meta getting even more lost boxes, causing more issues, just games going to time and stuff like that. I
Right.
just would not touch Gardevoir for this tournament. I think it is very powerful. However, I think also people just know how to play versus it now, and I think that it's just I think that with all the path decks, there's just so much that it has to deal with right now. I would probably stay away from that. So yeah, that would be the one deck I do not see myself playing unless something crazy happens. I will say if there is one list that I would play, it would be the Brent list that got top 8s with the heavy fog crystal and stuff like that. I thought that was kind of a cool version of Gardevoir. That was actually the version of Gardevoir that I liked a lot. But as of right now, I don't think I'll be personally playing it. Maybe for Toronto or something like that, that changes. But as of right now, for Sacramento, I would not play it.
All right, very cool. Thank you all so much for your time, and good luck to everybody in Sacramento. Last thing, Gabe, would you be willing to give us a list of cool local places, things to check out in Sacramento since you are a native?
Yes. So I had some things written down actually prepared for this. So first off, for full transparency, there is not a whole lot of things to do in Sacramento. There is Golden One Center, which is where the Sacramento Kings play. They will be playing on Sunday night a preseason game versus the Golden State Warriors. So that will
Nice.
be cool if you're in town until Monday. Maybe go check that out. There is Old Town Sacramento, Sutter's Fort, a couple of cool things. A lot of history in Sacramento with the gold rush that happened. A lot of that went through the Sacramento area. So there's a lot of history there as well in Old Town Sacramento. There's a cool railroad museum as well if you're interested in that. But yeah, no, it's a pretty cool city. Definitely some stuff to do. It's admittedly not your Los Angeles or not your New York or stuff like that. There's not infinite things to do, but I think you'll have a decent time here. And at least it's not Fresno, California, like the previous California regional. There's actually stuff to do at night, I think, as well. So it's a cool city. I mean, yeah, no hate to Fresno, by the way, but yeah.
All right, thank you so much. And once again, good luck to everybody this weekend. Do your best. Peace.